You've been a busy person, and we'll find out more. Uh, but again, thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thanks. How are you doing?
Well, I was just online and, talking to folks about COVID and its effect on all of us, and sharing some of that, and that now that we're coming out of it, what is ahead of us, right? And there's a lot ahead of us. And of course, you know it all too well, not just personally, but socially, and we have to address those issues. So Shepard, before I'd like to read a bit of your bio for folks as we start. And so let me turn this over and point to the presentation, so I can just focus on reading about you. Shepard Fairey was born in Charleston, South Carolina. He received his Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration at Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, for those who know the school, in Providence, Rhode Island. In 1989, he created the Andre the Giant Has a Posse sticker that transformed into the Obey Giant art campaign, with imagery that changed the way people see art and the urban landscape. After more than 30 years, his work has evolved into an acclaimed body of work, including the 2008 Hope Portrait of Barack Obama, found at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. In 2017, the artist collaborated with Amplifier to create the We the People series, which was recognizable during the women's marches and other rallies worldwide in defense of national and global social justice issues. Fairey stickers, guerrilla street art presence, and public murals are recognized globally. His works are in permanent collections of the Boston Institute of Contemporary Art, Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, the Victoria and Albert, and many others, including your streets. That said, that's a mouthful about you. And Shepard, one of the questions that I like to ask artists is about who they were before they became the artists, right? And you kind of, as a young guy, fairly normal household, and you had kind of a working class family. And so I wonder, how does somebody like you get attracted to subculture and urban cultures?
I saw Style Wars, and there was this kid in there with like kind of a shaggy do. Just kidding, man. I mean, that was an influence, but that wasn't the first thing. For all those that don't know, Mayor from Style Wars, just look it up. His part's awesome. How old are you in that?
I was probably 15.
Yeah, you look really young. And so, growing up in South Carolina, I like to draw and paint from the time I was little, but it was really when I discovered skateboarding and punk rock that things opened up for me. I was not a super happy kid. I wasn't a miserable kid, but I went to private school. All my peers were preppy. I just, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I didn't feel like I fit in. It's such a cliche, but when I discovered skateboarding and punk rock, and there was this rebellious music with art that went with it, and skateboarding was about aggression and not team sports sort of conformity. It just opened my eyes. And so initially, I think my understanding of creativity that was empowering and it had a rebellious side to it was punk rockers making their own t-shirts and stencils and flyers and going out and gluing them up or stapling them up. And so, I got really into cutting stencils and making homemade stickers. My mom had a Xerox machine, which was really helpful. But it was a small scene. But then when you look at that, my move into appreciating graffiti was really fast because I loved The Clash. They were one of my favorite bands, and Futura had done stuff for the Radio Clash cover and the lyrics, the handwritten lyrics for the Combat Rock album, and he raps on Overpowered by Funk, and he talks about graffiti in the rap. So yeah, it was once my mind was open to not just following the status quo and then trying to find ways to use my creativity that that fell in line with the culture I liked. All of a sudden, the dominoes started to fall and the discoveries made sense.
What's interesting to me is, and one of the things I was trying to piece together, right? Because you have this rebellion. I knew you were into punk and skateboarding. And then, of course, there's a, like I said, a kind of very stable home life. And what I wonder, were there any civic values at home that shaped your political views? And did you adapt counterculture as a response to it, right? Because you were kind of living probably a very vanilla life, and then this other world was existing all around you.
Well, my parents are really great people, but they're pretty square. My mom was head cheerleader and my dad was captain of the football team, and they made good grades. They got married when they were 19. My mom taught English to put my dad through medical school. Then, they had one girl and one boy as kids. I mean, it's like, it's straight out of like a nuclear family sitcom. And yet, my parents were such perfectionist go-getters that I always felt like there was no way I could live up to it. So my sort of self-defense mechanism was to say, well, I don't want that anyway. And yeah, it was in part a reaction against the conservatism of where I grew up and my own family. Even though my parents were progressive politically, they were always Democrats. When I say progressive politically, I mean in the comfort of our own home, they would say how horrible racism was and classism, and my mom always did a lot of volunteer work for like the pregnant teenagers at this place called Horizon House, and my dad with his medical practice frequently did barter with patients who didn't have the money to pay their medical bills, like people who could bring in anything from fruit or tomatoes they grew to providing, like, working on our cars if they broke down. So at least I was around that, but really my political views, I think, were mostly shaped by the Clash, the Dead Kennedys, and Bob Marley.
Wow. That's a good lineup right there.
Well,
not that. So the reason there's a thread in that, right, for me, all right, about what shapes a young person and how they're responding to the world around them. And interestingly enough, you're from South Carolina, but went to Los Angeles, California, right, for school, art school, high school.
Yeah, I did a year of art high school in Idlewild, which is near LA, but it's up in the mountains. But the cool thing about going to that school was that we did take trips into LA, and I was around a really progressive group of people. I was supposed to go to the North Carolina School of the Arts for my senior year of high school, but I got kicked out of the summer program, the summer between my junior and senior years, and then they wouldn't let me go there for that following fall semester. And so my parents were scrambling to find a school. They were so pissed at me. I didn't do anything that bad. I spent the night out without permission. I forged my RA's name in the ledger and thought I was slick. But anyway, it wasn't anything that bad. But I still left my parents about 6 weeks to find a school for me. So luckily I went to this school in California. And when we were there, we would drive into LA to see art shows and go to Venice Beach and things like that. But one time when we were going to the MoCA to see a pop art retrospective, this guy Robbie Canal had put all these posters around downtown that were an unflattering portrait of Ronald Reagan that said Contra above and Diction below, and that was during Iran-Contra Gate. So for anyone that doesn't know, Reagan was secretly selling arms to Iran to fund this war in Central America. And you know, he should have been impeached for that, but he put all the blame on Oliver North. But I saw this poster. The Dead Kennedys were always railing against Reagan and had a lot of great imagery. So I was sort of primed by that from punk rock. But I saw these posters, and it was well painted. It was political. It was funny, satirical. It was well designed graphically, and it was an act of defiance in public space. So basically everything I was excited about was encapsulated by this one artist. And even though I didn't start my street art campaign until a couple years later, the gears were turning in my head.
Yeah, and you know, I'm so glad you bring Ronnie up, because he was so important, and in New York, he was as an artist, but as a political voice, and that these campaigns, they were unflattering, but it was really reflective of the society, of these people in society. Yeah, but again, the graphic style, it makes sense to me, the graphic style, the appeal of him to you, because by the time you get to RISD, you start exploring new things. And I know I've been to RISD and up there with Brown, and I know how conservative and loose it can get. And that while you're there, you start developing Andre the Giant, the sticker. And what's interesting about that the sticker, you know, captured everybody's imagination and support, not just locally, but just globally, to propagate them throughout the world. You clicked on something that I was really curious about that goes into your manifesto about phenomenology, right?
Yeah.
And that may be a you know, bit heavy for a deep dive conversation, but I think it kind of just, that mindset really kind of aligns up with the artist you became, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the Andre thing, I think, is pretty well known, that was a spontaneous joke with a skateboard friend who I was trying to just teach how to make stencils. But once the sticker was out within our clique, and then, you know, the other people that we knew that were going, hey, you know, where can I get those stickers? And I started to notice this fascination with wanting to be in on something mysterious. And I thought, well, the more it's out there, the more it's going to get under people's skin. They're going to say, why don't I know about it? What is it? Or this thing is vandalism, and, you know, get rid of it. And I was just fascinated by that idea of who is attracted to and who is repelled by an image based on what the image is, how it's disseminated, whether it seems like it's part of authority or counterculture. And so I just wanted to explore that. It made me laugh. It felt like, instead of just being a spectator in life, I was doing something that was creating conversations. And then as I saw reactions and you know, a little bit of a dialogue with the public, I decided to do research. And that was when I discovered phenomenology, Heidegger's theory that people become very numb to their surroundings and they need novel experiences to reawaken a sense of wonder and make them more analytical, more critical, more observant. I also had been a huge fan of the Sex Pistols, and they were, their manager, Malcolm McLaren, and their graphic artist, Jamie Reed, were both big fans of Situationism, which, you know, was a French art movement from the 60s that was heavily associated with the 1968 Paris student protests, and really was driven by the idea that people need to be woken up out of sort of a waking trance, and they need you know, they need things that shake, they need experiences that shake things up. And so you know, I was just looking at different philosophies that I could use as sort of an intellectual justification for my mischief, but it wasn't total BS.
No, and it's there's something to that, that, you know, the sensationalism is so provocative and curious to us.
Yeah.
But what I found that was in fact a bit phenomenal about all this was how many active participants were down with you. They were just they were down with Andre. Like you said, Andre had a posse, so people would collect stickers or post them up. Um, and again, there was this open question about Andre the Giant in our cities, like who is it? Why? Yes, he's this famous wrestler, but why adopt somebody's identity? Yes, it was a joke, but then it became much more because I think the graphic itself and its cold stare at us, right?
Yeah.
And also who Andre was in some ways, this very big brute wrestling guy who was kind of a very tender man in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to choose this iconography and again, use it as a propaganda item that would kind of mature and kind of push you towards a graphic identity and relationship with the public through graphic identity. And so one of the things that I do want to ask you is about alternative graphics, right? Because alternative graphics was really important to you because that's really where you start production, these processes. You figure out your process of disseminating both images, messages, and product.
Yeah, that's right. So, alternate graphics was the name of my screen printing company, but I chose those letters AG because of Andre the Giant. Alternate graphics had some continuity, and I had fallen in love with screen printing when I was at RISD. I did some screen printing even in high school, but as an art medium, the more I understood about artists that I liked, such as Robert Rauschenberg and Andy Warhol, Barbara Kruger, the more I realized that screen printing wasn't just a something for technical reproduction. It could be used as part of art process. So I love the versatility of it, and it allowed me to work on unique pieces as well as multiples and make stickers, T-shirts, posters, whatever I wanted to make. So I decided that that would be the business I would go into after college, so that I would have screen printing equipment at my disposal to make both my own work and do work for customers. And that ranged from stickers for Sonic Youth to local restaurant T-shirts and karate uniforms. I mean, whatever I could do to make a little bit of money. But it also allowed me to produce stickers very inexpensively. And part of the reason, to get back to what you were saying about people embracing what I was doing, was that I was trying to create what I would characterize as kind of a punk rock chain letter, with sending the Manifesto and a sheet of uncut stickers, as well as cut stickers and an 8.5 by 11 Xeroxable master sheet, so that somebody could just go and get crack and peel and run off their own stickers at Kinko's or wherever. And so this idea of how to make this something people would participate in, because it wasn't expensive, they didn't need to be precious. Almost everything that had any resonance was immediately commodified for the highest price possible. I decided that that was not the way to have something absurd take hold, in a broader way. It needed to be really accessible and not feel like you're just sending your money to somebody else who's then going to buy a mansion with the money. It wasn't where I was coming from philosophically. Two, I felt psychologically that was the way to, become pen pals and with a bunch of people. And then also, I knew that if people saw transparently what the methodology I was using, the techniques I was using were, they might then empower themselves by applying those same techniques to things that were more personal to them. So, you know, all of this stuff was factoring into how I was disseminating the stickers and how I kept them extremely cheap or free for a long, long time.
And this is, let me ask you this. Was this pre-computer days, pre-technology? Are there?
Yeah, I didn't learn how to use a computer until around 1998. This was, you know, I started in '89, and I really had stuff clicking along by 92. 92 was when I graduated from college, and I already had been running alternate graphics for a year at that point. I started that company the summer before my senior year of college, the summer after my junior year. And hey, look at that guy up there.
Young guy. Yeah, I'll go
Yeah.
back. You know what? Here's the thing. I was showing the video and thinking about this. The mindset of a young man like yourself being so aware at such a young age, uh, you know, with the presence of mind, again, the manifesto was something that I didn't know about that rather impressed me, right? At a young age, you're thinking much broader about the impact and aspirations of the work that you're putting out there, right? And as you're doing this, right, as you're going on and finding these low-tech ways of getting up, the process, your process was incredible because of the scale, the ambition of your scale and placement and risk that you were willing to take.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to give a lot of people credit for inspiring me. But I became very motivated. You know, for example, the first time I went to New York, actually the second time I went there, but the first time I went was sort of a little bit of a sense of who I really was. I was 16, and there was graffiti all around Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn. I was staying in Williamsburg. My friend and I came to New York from South Carolina to see the Smiths and GBH and the Cro-Mags. We somehow pre-internet found out those shows were going on. But all we did was skate the Brooklyn banks every day, go to St. Mark's Place and go to the record stores. And there was graffiti everywhere and there were posters everywhere. And I was inspired by both. The scale and the daring of the graffiti was what really impressed me. And then when I was at RISD, I would go to New York and see the same thing. And then by maybe 91, 92, Revs and Cost were starting to get up a lot with paste ups. Mm-hmm. And I just saw the level of proliferation, the volume of stuff they were doing as insane. I didn't know who they were at the time. Then I found out they were also graffiti artists, but they had started doing paste ups and stickers for the mass coverage they could achieve with it. And so I'd say that the daring of graffiti and the volume of Revs and Cost were both really, really inspirational for me. And, you know, I remember driving into New York. My best friend was going to NYU, so I would drive from Providence to New York, and Jest and Med had the Cross Bronx Freeway totally crushed out. And I just was like, okay, you know, Jest's letters are really easy to read. And a lot of graffiti, even if I like the style, it's a bit cryptic. It's not easy for me always to read it at a glance. But Jest, his stuff was like blocky with a little bit of flavor. And then Med had that star icon. And I just was like, okay, where those guys are getting up, freeway spots, how instantly recognizable the imagery is. That's the kind of thing I need to do.
So these guerrilla tactics, right? You have to, there are two things about all this which are interesting to me. One, the guerrilla tactics employed by writers and street bombers, but also where they conflict, right? Where you're vying for space, right? and sometimes having to go over each other. And one of the things that's always been of interest to me is that relationship between street art and graffiti and how you negotiate public space, right? It's a kind of a touch and go kind of thing in the community. It's a real conversation we have because I think it's misunderstood in terms of the relationship between the artist and the public space and the genres. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I know a lot of people who love to battle, and for them it's battling other artists. That's where the excitement in battling is for them. For me, the battle is between people with my mentality, my philosophy, and then all the people that bow down to authority without questioning it, and and follow rules without thinking whether that's a tool of oppression or a mechanism for a functional society. And that's always the debate, right? But I always thought to myself, even if there's an artist whose attitude I don't like or I'm not in love with their work, I have more in common with them than the cops and the bankers and the lawyers. And so I'm not going to mess with their stuff. I'm going to respect their stuff because I think we're coming from a similar place, and we can argue over the minutia within a narrower culture, or focus on the big picture principles, which is that for me was more people than just corporations and the government should be able to express themselves in public space. And so I always respected graffiti writers and street artists, but if people went over me, I would go and repair my spots, but I never battled people. There was one guy in San Diego I battled because he really needed to learn a lesson, but yeah, for the most part, I'd rather not add fuel to what I think is a sort of nonsensical battle anyway. And so, people go over me, and I go and I try to fix my spots. And I've said before that haters come and go. I mean, people in the genre come and go. It's not, I've been arrested 18 times. You have to actually be pretty willing to endure a lot of challenges to stick around. And whether that's being arrested or, having other artists attack your stuff, or realizing that the weather or new development takes out your spots, that it's ephemeral, that you can't be precious. All of that is, for me, something that I don't want to complicate by battling other artists.
Yeah. Well, Shepard, you bring up something very interesting, right? About you're letting me know that you've been arrested so many times, and that there's an implicit bias between graffiti and street art, right? It seems to me sometimes that writers do get harsher penalties or harassed more if they're bombing and doing pieces than per se maybe street bombing. But I think it's quite. I think it's wild that you have a. What is it that allows you to kind of get arrested 18 times and not do long-term time? Is it the way the laws are structured, or is it you have high-powered lawyers?
Well, I mean, being white probably helps. Then there's the fact that a lot of times when I've been arrested, it's for something as small as a sticker or a poster. And I don't think that those fall under the same statutes as graffiti. But, one time I was arrested for putting up a poster, but the cops were so excited that they found a couple of cans of black spray paint in my bag, because then they could up the charge. Because just having a can of spray paint if it's associated with potentially doing something considered vandalism, then it's a tool of criminal mischief. And, you know, all of these things are, when you look at the way the laws work, it's frequently driven by racism and classism. So, you know, even though they're not going to say that explicitly, who's perceived as a threat? You know, a white guy doing, saying, "Hey man, I'm just promoting my band." Or somebody that's like, this is the one opportunity I have coming from the Bronx, where I don't own property personally, but to claim something with my name, you know, that's more of a threat to those people. And that's, you know, I'm fighting that in the content of my work all the time. But yes, I've been lucky, I think, because street art, a lot of the methods I use in my street art are not as harshly punished. But, you know, I have been beaten up by the cops, had my insulin taken to the point where I got really sick. And one time I really thought I was going to die. I'm not exaggerating. I've had to hire expensive lawyers I got charged with assault, even though I didn't do any assaulting. The cop assaulting me cut his knuckles punching me, and then said, "Well, see what you made me do. Now I have to charge you with assault." But luckily I had a couple of witnesses. But, you know, I mean, this is all sort of intrinsically part of what I'm pushing back against with my art. And, you know, when I tell these stories, sometimes people think I'm exaggerating, and they have no idea what a lot of people from the graffiti world who've had cases against them have actually had to deal with. You know, it's just not their world. So I try to let people know, but it's actually hard to get them to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you kind of strike the nerve of something really real about authority and and governance over us, right? And this is why, you know, it's so unusual that graffiti and street art would thrive in the way that it has, when in certain periods of art, you know, this kind of rebellion and propaganda was always kind of quelled, and people were killed or sent away to the gulags, let's just say. And that, you know, where that was leading me to, right, about, you know, authority and authoritarianism, and not just the politics of it, the visual identity of it, right? And it's interesting that you, and this image that we're looking at, which is so striking, at the Bowery Wall, you shifted gears at one point where it wasn't just Andre the Giant, there were words, you know, there was Obey and, you know, others, but then you found a visual language, a graphic language, but also a color palette, an aesthetic that echoes back to you know, Rodchenko and the you know, the Russians, the Russian avant-garde, who lived under these trying times, and their response was to innovate,
Yeah.
and create powerful messages and works that actually indict and inform. Switching over, right, to that format, to finding this aesthetic, how did you stumble into this, right, and finding your brand identity?
Well, I for a couple of years I was really excited just to get the initial quirky Andre image out, and then I started to get bored of that, and I wanted to not stop, because I always felt that, you know, repetition is important, but I also wanted to have evolution within that. And when I looked at certain things that were compelling to me in the graffiti world, there was the "Hello, my name is" stickers that were almost always red, black, and white. There was Barbara Kruger's work that was red, black, and white. There was the Russian constructivist work that was mostly red, black, and white. There was, you know, political posters from all over the world, whether it was Chinese propaganda or Cuban propaganda. And so also very, very coincidentally, but serendipitously, the Kinkos in Providence had these machines that had a red toner cartridge and a black toner cartridge.
Nice.
So my basically things I was attracted to aesthetically all of a sudden became doable on a very low budget. And so I started to run off 11 by 17 copies that I could then grid up to make larger installations. So when you look at a lot of my work that, you know, started off as grids of 18 by 24s that were screen printed, or 11 by 17s that were Xeroxed, you know, that modular approach was coming from the limitations I was dealing with scale wise. And so I always tried to take those limitations and turn them into something I could work with that would be a signature style. So when you look at the visual language of my work starting in the mid 90s, using the red, black, and white, and the different motifs that you could easily connect to each other, it really came out of that desire to have continuity and evolution.
And you kind of strike this really like interesting note, right? Between, you know, very poignant commentary, political commentary, social commentary, and design and decorative design. So in a way, it kind of so in your face, but it also in a weird way has a way of diffusing something, right? Like we're looking at this corporate welfare and stuff, and there, you know, like there's beautiful decorative things that are going on, but you have to read deeper into it. So it's kind of a very interesting psychological ploy, so to speak.
Well, one of my thoughts was that having something have visual power but also decorative appeal would maybe mean that it wasn't as threatening. You know, for a little while, with just this sort of Orwellian Big Brother style icon face,
Yeah.
I actually wanted it to be threatening, and I liked the idea that most of what you confront on the street is propaganda, it's advertising, but it's something maybe sinister in a benevolent package. And I liked the idea of flipping that around and presenting something that was benevolent in a sinister package to just encourage people to go, what is the real agenda behind this? That it would be, you know, looking at my work would have a ripple effect to encourage people to question other work. But then later, I also realized that, you know, that a sort of inviting pop vernacular with humor that, you know, with decorative elements like patterns, that all these things could be, you know, the sugar with the medicine. And so, you know, it's a lot of trial and error over the years to figure out what's the right balance. And I found that it really requires a variety of approaches, because different people respond to different things. But, you know, I've got about half a dozen different things in the quiver that I can do, that all might touch on the same subject, but in different ways.
Right. And what's interesting about what you just said is that in trying to find a variety of ways to address the public and your audience, you start collaborating with writers, right? And here we have you collaborating with Cope, and that embrace, it seems like, you know, yes, the graffiti writers were embracing you and collaborating with you. And also that kind of, you know, I did that kind of bridge a gap for you, perhaps?
Well, you know, when I started, I was already really excited about connecting with a lot of the graffiti artists, and I wore a 25-year-old Zephyr shirt today. It might even be older than that. I think he gave this to me in like '95, because, you know, I had met Futura and Zephyr and Dr. Revolt, and a bunch of those Stash in the 90s, and Hayes, all those guys, I really looked up to what they were doing, but they were all people that were not just doing graffiti. They were also making t-shirts and toys and doing fine art. And I always, this sort of like Sharks versus the Jets, you know, street art graffiti thing always perplexed me. But I loved whenever I had the opportunity to do something with a graffiti writer who was down with what I was doing, to show that, you know, that it's different aesthetics, but often a similar mindset. And even if it's not an identical mindset, at least there's, you know, there's enough to be allies rather than enemies. I was always psyched on that. And so, you know, I did stuff over the years with, you know, Mike Giant, Cope, Risk, a lot of different people, Slick, but yeah, it's for me a logical pairing, and so I'm down for that when I can do it, and I think I can make it make sense aesthetically.
Yeah, I love that you do it, and I love the, you know, the intent, the authentic intent in all of that, and I know that, you know, you'll have your critics and your naysayers, but I think they missed the point. That's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, and you can clear some of that up, right? Because you're coming from a very genuine place, and again, you're kind of very unique in your own space in that way, and in a way have became a kind of, let's just say, and you know, when I was younger, Keith Haring was kind of a new blueprint for us, right? And how an artist can go beyond the confines of just the type of art they make, and, you know, pushing that up into other spaces, right? Into their interests, into their deeper interests in life. Let's just say, music is one of the deeper interests in your life, and since young, as you've expressed. And you've done some wonderful commercial collaborations, you know, and I found some of them here with Smashing Pumpkins and the Flogging Molly album and the Black Eyed Peas. I would be remiss if I don't talk to you about music, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you love music. You're a dope DJ. Let's talk about that, about music and the importance of music in your life and in your art.
Yeah, sure. Like I was saying before, music has played a really important role in my life, philosophically. So early on, it was the punk rock stuff and Bob Marley, but then I discovered Public Enemy and Eric B. and Rakim, Boogie Down Productions, NWA, Slick Rick, and all of that, Run DMC and the Beastie Boys, of course. All of that stuff was the more democratic version of what I was trying to do as a visual artist. So that's always been my model, is the whole DIY spirit of a lot of my favorite music, and the accessibility of it, the way that nobody feels like they have to have gone to art school to say, yeah, this song is dope or it's whack. And so, you know, music as also a very visceral thing. One of the things I love about street art is that not only is it visceral doing it, where you got the adrenaline rush of, you know, trying to climb to an ill spot or get away from the cops, or, you know, any of that, but there's also the visceral side of experiencing something that's an unexpected intervention in the landscape. So, you know, I've had that experience as a doer and a viewer, and listening to music, you feel it. You go to a concert, you feel it. You know, I think that a lot of the best things in life are about, you know, a really intense feeling that then you can marry to some sort of, you know, idea. You can intellectualize it, but it's rarely gonna stick if you try to go to the other way. Like, oh, let's, you know, be really
Mm-hmm.
sterile and intellectual and then hope people are going to be feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if that makes any sense, that's why I love music so much.
Yeah, and I wonder, right? Because I'll confess to this. Sometimes when I'm working, and if I play, I have to play music when I work, but also if I don't have music, I have a soundtrack in mind. If I'm, you know, there's the drama. I was looking at some of the pictures of you going out at night, and I'm just thinking, yeah, you know, nice Wagner soundtrack behind that. That's what that feels like. There's this kind of energy. But that,
Well, for me, it's The Predator by Ice Cube, but
boom, even better.
but yeah, but Wagner, I can the helicopter scene in Apocalypse Now. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's I get it. That sort of you know, that epic feeling of if you're on a mission. It's the best.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah. You know, as we're looking at some of your work, one of the things, and I want to kind of push forward because of time, that you know, these campaigns, these campaigns that just go on and on, and tell me about, you know, when you do work, and sometimes you're not the one posting them up, you have a team, right? And
Yeah.
let's talk about the importance of that in practice as an artist of your stature and your responsibility about having an organized studio and a team that will help you get your message out there.
Well, you know, I because it took me forever to even be able to scrape by. You know, I was living hand to mouth for the first 10 years of my career. I did everything by myself, but then I started to hire a couple of my close friends, and the idea was always for me to try to push what I was doing as far as I could and build whatever structures I needed to take it further. And so that's been a real luxury as unexpectedly my clothing started to sell, my prints started to sell, my design services were in demand. And yeah, for me, you know, I just want to do more of what I want to do with as much pure control over it as possible. And so being successful financially has given me that freedom. I'm not a very materialistic person. I collect records and art, and that's pretty much it. But the books, you can see I collect books, but yeah, working with a team has been amazing. I mean, I can't really talk about all the methodology because
Yeah,
it's
of
like
course.
I get in trouble for a lot of the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
And,
But well, one of the things, let's talk about team members, because Amanda, your wife, and you are a team in many ways, uh,
yeah,
and kind of the Christo and Jean-Claude of our generation, sort of. Um, that that kind of it's kind of a family business, right? Or goal, I think, right?
yeah.
Objective.
The Amanda and I have been together for 22 years, and she's been involved in going out bombing and negotiating contracts and you know, a zillion other things. She's a subject in a lot of my work. She's um, posed for me to take reference pictures. So yeah, I'm very lucky that she's part of my life and that we get to work together in the way we do. We have two kids who are two girls, 13 and and just turned 16, Vivian. And you know, 3 years ago when I was doing that Blondie mural in New York at Bleecker and Bowery, the girls were helping. We were running behind schedule on cutting the stencils on the wall to paint the mural, and it was pretty amazing to have Amanda and my two daughters helping, and then you know, my assistant Nick, all of us working on it simultaneously. But you know, I look at all of this stuff that I'm able to do as stuff where I couldn't do it without my team, and or at least on the scale I'm doing it. And so, you know, they deserve a lot of credit. I have really good people that I work with. A lot of them have been with me for years and years. one of my art assistants I met at a skateboard contest in 1986, and we've been friends ever since. But we've been working together for about 15 years, and another one of my coworkers has been with me for 17 years, or 18 years, another one for 13 or 14 years, another one 8 years. So, it's very fortunate that I have a crew that they're like family, and we all work together on these really intense murals where we're high up on buildings, on swing stages, up on water towers, and it's hard blue collar work, and I know I can rely on them, and we get a lot of stuff done. I think I'm up to about 108 painted murals now, and as well as making a lot of fine art, a lot of prints, doing a lot of work for various charities, and
right.
Yeah.
We're looking at some of these murals. I'm sorry for interjecting, but again, one of the things that's been so wonderful in your development is your proactivity for social justice and causes, and setting an example. And of course, no better people to set it forth than your family and those around you and your peers. One of the things that was just so monumental for our nation was the election, right? That the Barack Obama election, and that you lent yourself to that campaign in a way, and coming out of your what we're looking at now, George Bush, because when you did that George Bush campaign, it was so poignant and pointed, and the idea that the artwork you created was so sensational and inspiring hope, right? Tell me a bit about, I mean, this is public knowledge, this story, but arriving at this, but then also, again, kind of being injected into a political platform that may or may not fit you, but there's a bigger picture about it, and that this signifies culturally.
Yeah, I made the Hope poster following doing a lot of work that was against the Iraq War, against the George Bush agenda of the Patriot Act, shrinking privacy, and rising xenophobia, nationalism. So I was inspired by Obama as somebody who, at least as a campaigner and a speaker, seemed to share a lot of my ideas about the best path forward for the country. I thought it was very unlikely that somebody like that would succeed, but I thought I would like to support, and I'll do anything I can to help. So a lot of people, they may not remember that when the caucuses and primaries were approaching in 2008, most people assumed that Barack Obama would be crushed by the Clinton juggernaut really quickly, and then I made this I think right around the Iowa caucus, and then Obama won the Iowa caucus. I'm not saying it's because of my poster. I'm saying that it was very unexpected, and my wife was saying to me, you're really busy. Maybe you should wait to do this poster that you want to do until you see whether Obama gets traction. And I said, well, even if me making a poster changes 5 people's minds, I should do it now. I shouldn't wait. There's no time to wait. You gotta seize the future, not wait for it. So that was my idea. I made this not in conjunction with the official campaign. I just did it as a tool of grassroots activism that was a free download, a PDF that could be scaled to any size. I then made some posters that were sold, 750 posters, 350 were put up on the street, the other 350 were sold, and that was used to print another 10,000 posters. then sold a couple of paintings and about 1,000 more posters, and that money was used to print 500,000 stickers and 300,000 posters that were all given away. And to
Wow.
see something that I made catching on in the way that it did, and actually seeming to impact the conversation, was phenomenal. You know, I was just happy, one, that that Obama was getting the traction he was getting, and that, you know, that maybe my poster was a symptom of that, or maybe in some instances a cause of that. Who knows? But the fact that art was playing a major role, and art by a street artist who'd been arrested a lot was playing a major role in an election cycle when most people feel very powerless in the, you know, in the political process, and they may not even vote, they may not even think that democracy works. I liked that might encourage people to participate, because democracy doesn't work as well as it should. There's no doubt about that, but it works better when people participate.
And also, I love what you said, you know, like if at least 5 people, I can change 5 people, I've been, you know, you've been effective, and you've lent yourself to all these important campaigns over the years. And it's so important because, one, you have you're a known entity, but the work itself is, again, there's something magnificent about its directness, the clarity of design and messaging, and that, you know, for an artist like you to really, you kind of, there's really not it seems to me anyway, that there's not a space between you as the artist and the human and the humanitarian, and concern about these social causes we're facing. And that's a big responsibility for anyone, and let alone an artist that may be trying to figure out a career in a very difficult industry. What's keeping you there? What drives that for you?
Well, first, a few slides back, you had the protect and respect, and that's by one of my coworkers, Camilla Launis. You go forward. Boom, boom, boom.
Hope.
That one.
Yeah, here.
That one right there. And it, you know, a lot of the people that work in my studio they have their own style, but it's filtered through what's expected in connection to who I am. And so I want to give Camilla credit, but
Yes.
The rest of the images are mine. But you know, we do a lot. Not only me personally, but my studio does a lot of work for different social causes, because I basically have tried to bring people into the mix that have a similar mindset, that art is a really great tool of communication, and it shouldn't just be used for, you know, decorating rich people's houses or making iPhone cases. You know,
I know.
There's more to it than that, and I'm committed the way that Joe Strummer was committed, or the way Patti Smith is committed, or Chuck D is committed. It's just integral to who we all are, and sometimes I hate being a lightning rod, and it's really depressing to see some of the mean sort of reactionary, ignorant stuff that people say about me, but I know that I'm sticking my neck out because it's what I believe in, and I would feel worse if I were silent. So, you know, throw all the rocks you want. I'm going to be doing what I'm doing.
Right. And again, you balance that out with, you know, really tremendous and beautiful work for the public, right? These landmark communities, it beautifies communities, but it also, you know, the murals, as you know, especially you see that here and throughout other cities, it's a very sensitive conversation about the complicitness of street art and real estate and gentrification and beautification, right? It's a bit of a tightrope, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I try to have these conversations in a sophisticated way with people, though, because a lot of people are very unsophisticated in their reactions, and understanding the complex dynamics of what changes the affordability of neighborhoods, and what means that the wealthy are given priority over the not wealthy. A lot of that comes down to, I'd say, about 99.9% things other than what street artists are doing. However, street artists are like, the people creating a visual symbol that somebody could say is, is a symptom of gentrification or a cause. However, my response to all that is, one, I wouldn't work with any property owner or developer that I thought had moral, any moral conflicts with who I am. Now, that's not always easy to know. I've worked with companies like Levi's, who I think generally are really moral. They do a lot for the ACLU and voting rights and things like that. But it doesn't mean that they have always been perfect as a company. And a lot of people have their different arguments about the Goldman family in Miami.
Yeah.
I really like them. But what I say to everyone is, when you look at a lot of the causes of gentrification and how vulnerable people are displaced and their lives are made more difficult, this comes down to who you vote for. It comes down to government oversight and practices around what landlords and developers are able to do legally. And when the people speak loudly with their vote, as well as through every other means of communication they have, you're likely to have some regulation in that capacity. And street art to me is something that improves people's quality of life for the most part. So the idea that street artists shouldn't do art in public anymore because it might lead to a coffee shop opening them up, which might lead to a boutique opening up, which might lead to a predatory developer moving into the neighborhood 2 years later. I mean, there's a lot of hypotheticals there that maybe could be avoided, even if somebody does do a really nice piece of street art that everyone gets to enjoy free.
Right. And as we're here at the Wynwood Walls, and you mentioned Tony Goldman, because he was a catalyst for so much change in Soho in New York and other areas, but well known for what he did in Wynwood. And this mural, what's so important, particularly about what they've done, is landmark the community, right? A community that already had this culture, particularly more graffiti than street art, but now it's become a destination, and there's just a lot of development and gentrification and so on going on. But there is still a lot of graffiti, there's a lot of street art, there's a lot of people who are fans of your work that make their way to go look at your piece, to take pictures in front of it, and the rest of them. And the recent, you visited us when we opened up the museum, right? Which is kind of an addendum, so to speak, to explain what Wynwood Walls is, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a history. It's the precursor to what this development is. And what's really interesting, and what we're seeing now, again, is this rapid development that is taking down a lot of these murals. And I was talking with Jacob Kimball from Switzerland who's a scholar, but also an advocate for preservation of murals in Sweden. Have you gotten to that point in your career where you try to landmark and preserve, or can you preserve certain murals legally?
I've never tried to do that with any of mine, and there's a couple of reasons. One, I just don't have that big an ego. Two, I think that it's a very, very delicate balance between in the relationships between property owners and artists. And as much as I love the idea that art can be protected, when I look at something like the 5 Points decision, I think this could have a chilling effect on other property owners inviting artists to do something, because if then the artist claims that it's a landmark, that really impairs the freedom of the property owner. And it's not that, I mean, a lot of these things wouldn't come up if people were just cool to each other. But you know, when I think about street art and graffiti and how a lot of it is about the enjoyment of the process as much as it is the enjoyment of the product, and that one of the reasons it's such an empowering art form is that there is a heavy rotation, and it's not just the elites at the top of the pyramid ruling the scene. I'm always happy to say, hey, if my piece is starting to erode, give that wall to somebody else that's, you know, that deserves an opportunity. They deserve the space. So like Elle, I don't know whether you know her, but she did a Ruth Bader Ginsburg in New York over an older piece of mine, and you know, she's cool. She was like, I really don't want to disrespect you, but the plaster on the wall is starting to crumble, and they're gonna resurface this, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to do an RBG. I was like, I already got 3 years of my mural. Like, people shot photos, the neighborhood saw it, they lived with it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is worth celebrating, and you, as a female street graffiti artist, are underrepresented. You're kind. Get up there, rock it, you know.
Yeah.
And she did a great piece. So yeah, I mean,
yeah. And she's a beast. She works hard. She's a hard-working
that's where,
painter.
you know, that's just where I'm coming from. And I figure, like, if my stuff is meaningful to people, they'll try to protect it, and I don't have to be part of that process.
Is there a bit of comfort in that because of the commercial success you've had in other areas where maybe a mural may not be preserved, but there's plenty of legacy work that's archived and that's in museums and so on?
Yeah, I'm making paintings, and hopefully they're going to stick around. There's a lot of stuff that I make that I think people might hang on to, even screen prints. I know people that have been collecting my screen prints for 25 years that are still at it, and they hold up really well, actually. But I guess every artist wants to feel like, you know, something you're doing is going to be around for posterity, like, you know, that it's going to outlive you and matter. In fact, you know, one time I was talking to, I'm sure you know Ryan McGinnis, right?
Yeah.
Talking to Ryan McGinnis, and Ryan is pretty funny. He's like got a dry sense of humor, and I said, Ryan, you're very prolific, and so am I. What's your driver? And he was like, fear of death. What else?
Yes.
And you know, it's like, hey, we all have a sense of our own mortality. What are we leaving behind?
Right, legacy. I would agree with you, because I've always stated that I was a legacy artist, and I think people are getting more hip to that, about this generation claiming its legacy, because the way legacies are written or were written, you know, pre-80s, especially art history, it really it's very different because there's academic tones and it's very elitist, and somehow the world we exist in and how legacy is contained is because the streets, not only do the streets talk about you, the streets are taking pictures of you, they're sharing your pictures, they're buying the prints, they're, you know, they're engaged. And so you've created this phenomenal legacy for yourself. And so as we wrap this up, Shepard, you know, you are an artist of your time that's making art of your time, poignant art and important art, inspiring work that, you know, is so purpose driven. And I appreciate that about that, and that you shared this story with us and the people who have been here with us for the last hour and 12. And so with that, on behalf of the museum, I want to thank you for taking the time. And I give you the last word, my friend. Anything we should be looking forward to with you, or anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, you know, thanks, Mayor. I mean, you know, you're one of the people that I feel like has taken a very academic, but still cool approach to this material. I mean, you've taught college courses on it. You're part of the museum that is, you know, a really great historical exploration of a movement that a lot of people might experience pieces here and there, but they don't have a very thorough overview. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate that I'm getting a little bit of time to talk to you through the lens of that institution. And
yeah, you know, I got to just interject and say that it's been a labor of love and hard work for Alan and Allison and the team, given, you know, the circumstances we faced in the last year or so. And, you know, the endurance and support, you know, you vocally lending your support is so important to us.
yeah, well, I've known Ket since he was partially responsible for getting me in the Mark Echo Getting Up game, which was really cool. I mean, he's an awesome guy, somebody that's always thinking big picture culturally, and you know, micro and macro. It's you know, it's cool. It's just cool to be connected with people who have a vision. But yeah, what do I have coming up? You know, the usual stuff. I have some art shows, some museum shows, some murals, now that things are opening back up. And
will we see you at Art Basel?
Yeah, I should be there. I think I'm going to go. I mean, that was all sort of, I'm vaccinated, my crew's vaccinated, the things are opening back up, so I should be there. But yeah, I'm always going to be making work about all the big topics like abuse of authority, police brutality, racism, sexism, xenophobia, environmental destruction, and yeah, just doing my thing.
What about the aliens? Because they're around.
The aliens.
I kid, you don't have to answer that.
Yeah, you know, I'll wait until it's like Mars Attacks, and I have to really decide which side I'm on. Until then, they're not going to be really taking up a lot of mental space for me.
I got you. Well, listen, my friend, regards to you and Amanda and your team. You've been doing sensational work for some time. So again, thank you for spending time with me and everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Good to see you.
Cool. We'll catch up soon.
Peace.
Take care.